What's happening, YouTube? This is Immortal Coil, your future minister of whiskey mysticism. Revolution is my name. Tonight, you are listening to the show that tastes like whiskey, smells like men, and sounds like revolution. Tonight with me is my good friend, the hardest working moderator, Tommy, and the Guinea Pig Collective. How you doing tonight, sir?
Hey, Immortal, how's it going? And how's everybody out there in YouTube land? Even if you're not watching right now, I know you'll be watching later on because you can't help it.
For sure, my friend. Lots of people like to catch us on the replay while they're going about their activities that earn them money, whatever that may be. Well, before we launch into too much serious stuff, I want to go ahead and salute this guy. Italian composer Ennio Morricone dies at age 91. Now, in case you guys aren't familiar with this individual, he is the man who wrote this song. Forever cementing him as one of the iconic film scorers of our generation. What do you think, Tommy?
You know, I mean, quite honestly, that music actually encapsulated everything that you really needed to feel as far as that movie was concerned. Without that music score, would that movie have been as good as it was? I mean, honestly, there's so much to be said about a good musical score underneath any kind of movie or any kind of show that actually pushes it.
I agree. They want to say that The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, that trilogy was about a man with no name. But what conveys that? Is it the music? Is it the scenery? Is it Clint Eastwood? Would all that be possible without all those elements clashing together?
Oh, no, most definitely. It has to be all of them together, but the music is such a vital role to all of it. I mean, think about Star Wars. If you think about the characters and the story and everything involved with the special effects and everything, would it have been exactly the same without that musical undertone pushing the story?
No, I don't think so. And that's a lost art, honestly, is the art of the theme. So you have like an overall theme, and then you have each character has its own melody, and whether it's introduced or subverted or switched around, you got carried along the story by the melody.
No,
Whereas yeah,
without a doubt.
And then and I have to say this, disposable melodies, like composers nowadays and anybody who has spent time writing music, okay, we know what notes and what intervals create tension. We know what makes it feel triumphant. We know what makes you feel turned on. We know what makes you feel sad. But how many themes from Transformers can you hum, Tommy?
No. Well, if you're talking about the 86 movie, there's quite a few actually,
Oh, I was talking Michael Bay, but
Michael Bay. I mean, what's that? I don't watch that. I actually seen that first movie, okay, and I watched part of the second one. I couldn't stand the first one, but I thought I would give the second one a chance since it was on free TV. Couldn't stand it. I hate Bayformers because it took the original lore and the characters and everything that made it such a good property and franchise, and he ran it into the ground. And as far as their new reboot of it, that Bumblebee, that was trash too, in my opinion. And a lot of
Real.
people, a lot of people just think I'm crazy for saying that. I'm sorry. I grew up before those things were Transformers. I was collecting them when they were still micro-changed Diaclone figures. I was collecting them back then. And so when they were rebranded as the Transformers, I was right there at the very beginning. And I remember all the Marvel comic books that led up to the Sunbow cartoon and then eventually the 1986 movie. So,
Well, and we're speaking of a guy who thinks that the Ninja Turtles came from a different planet.
yeah. Yeah, I heard. I refuse to watch that too. There's something about Michael Bay and the trash he puts out that I just can't tolerate it. I refuse to watch that too. There's something about Michael Bay and the trash he puts out that I just can't tolerate it.
Yeah, we got some echo. Isn't that awesome? All right.
How did that happen?
Well, you know, it's probably the government. It's probably you know, the same people who tell you not to watch UFOs. Shit, man. So, what's your favorite Clint Eastwood movie?
Oh man, that is a really tough one. I really like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and I actually have a copy of it on DVD. But I also liked, oh God, which one was it? Two Mules for Sister Sarah.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I have to go with Josie Wales, man.
You know, that is another awesome one too. You know, what, especially when he spits on the dog's head.
Oh, I love that, dude. And a Missouri boat ride. Yeah, and then to make it specific to Ennio Morricone, what's your favorite of the Man with No Name series?
You know, I'm not really sure when it comes to that.
Well, you know, and maybe it's like the same thing that makes me want to say episode 4 when it comes to Star Wars. A Fistful of Dollars, man. It's a good movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we want to say RIP, sir. Our feelings and our thoughts are with you and your family. We know that you have a special mansion in Valhalla. And I don't know. I feel like the people who, or the spirits, the souls, whatever you want to call it, who come to Earth and contribute to our lore or to our sense of identity or help define a generation or a movement or give you some piece of yourself back to yourself, I think they have a space amongst the honored dead, man.
Yeah, without a doubt. Thank you for your contribution.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it is 6:41 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. You are listening to The Savage Perspective. Want to ask you, sir, how's your week been? What you been up to? Has anything strange or significant happened to you?
Oh, well, there is the whole mess with my mortgage company and all the stuff that goes along with that, having to sell things on eBay and get rid of some of my collectibles and everything. But yeah, it's just a big snafu. But I mean, I got to say, I got to thank everybody out in the community. I mean, not just the Phantom Menace, not just the Fourth Wave, but the YouTube community in general, for stepping up and helping me out when I was in need. I mean, it's just truly amazing. And a lot of people could say a lot of different things about, oh, well, I seen them help this person out and I seen them that help that person out. But when it happens to you, it's a completely different feeling. It actually, you just can't describe how it feels.
Well, and that's why I like to say that the Phantom Menace in general, and especially these people who are listening to the show right now, whether you're live or on a repeat, are the best audience in the world. You know, I've seen people who, no shit, were like dudes walking down the street with their hands in their pockets one day going, oh, I wish I could write a book, to like fast forward a month and they have like $45,000 in the bank because people believed in them and because they found their voice and because they connected with the right people. So, yeah.
I mean, it's truly amazing what that positivity as somebody can give off to somebody else can actually do. And what's the word I'm looking for? I hate when that happens, but they actually not so much push you, but they make you believe enough that you are willing to not only give your time, but your resources or whatever else is required to see them succeed. I mean, that's something else when you could reach out and touch somebody one-on-one like that. I mean, being a musician, I mean, you understand that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you struggle hard, coming up with an original idea and then sharing it with somebody. Like you have that fear, like maybe it's not good enough, but then you get like a response, you get that electricity transmitted back to you. And then suddenly you're like, oh, okay, this might be something. And that's not to say that every egg you shit is the golden egg, but every now and then we stumble upon something that's precious and that deserves to be heard.
And I think there's too many people that actually, and I've seen it where they think that they've hit gold the first time around. And quite honestly, like myself now, whether it's music or whether it's I'm making a video, I am almost never completely satisfied with it. And if you're never completely satisfied with it, that means that you're actually putting in the effort. Where somebody who thinks, hey, I did it the first time and I think it's great and it's good enough. You didn't put in the effort.
Right. I mean, how many times did you play that same riff and then you found a different way to embellish it?
Oh, absolutely. Matter of fact, I just did one recently and I wrote it down the first time through because it just came into my head and I wrote something down. And then I would go back and I would play it and I was like, well, maybe if I just tweak this or I change these two lines, make it start differently, it'll sound better. And you wind up rearranging it and it starts to sound a little better. And then later on down the road, you might decide, well, I want to embellish it a little bit more and just add something else. I mean, it's the same thing. As long as you never feel like you're completely satisfied with it, you're still trying and you're trying to make it better. And that's the whole thing with doing anything, whether it's music, whether it's YouTube, whether it's TV, it doesn't matter. As long as you're striving to become better, there's always going to be a progression. Whereas some people where they just think that they have it right off the bat, they're going to be stagnant and they're never going to do anything.
Well, yeah. And then there's that magic moment when inspiration turns into something original. I grew up listening to classic rock. So I would hear stuff like the Beatles and Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath. And then I'd turn around and write my own stuff, which was very much informed by that, but spoke to my spirit.
Well, I think that nobody has ever written or made anything that wasn't completely or, wasn't in some way, shape, or form influenced by somebody else. Everybody is going to have some kind of influence because if you didn't have that influence, why would you ever start it to begin with? Something had to inspire you to do it.
Agreed. And that's what the power of media, the power of motion picture, the visual arts and storytelling, back to the time of campfires really brought out in humanity. I don't know about you, Tommy, but as a young man, Star Trek really spoke to me.
Oh yeah, without a doubt, man. I loved the original Star Trek show and Next Generation as well. But I mean, I remember as a young kid, because growing up in the 70s. My dad, huge Star Trek fan from the time that it came out and all the way up through the reruns that they were doing in the early 80s, just watching all those shows it was great. I mean, even now I will go back on Netflix. I mean, I think they still have it on there. Like they did the last time I looked. They haven't taken it away yet, but I would go back on there and just rewatch some of those episodes.
Oh, for sure. And I actually had one of those early, my dad like pats his knee and come and watch this because this is important. And I might have been 8 or 9. And I am sorry to say that first time I was just like, Star Trek? What is this? I'm like, no, Dad, I want to watch He-Man. Come on. And he'd be like, okay. But then probably when I was 11 or 12, man, that's when I was able to fully grasp what this guy was trying to tell me. And my, I was aware of the original series, but my Star Trek series was The Next Generation.
My favorite character from that had always been Worf.
Yeah.
There's
Worf.
Something about the way Michael Dorn played him too.
Did you ever go to like Comic-Con or have a chance to meet any of those guys?
Unfortunately, no.
Okay.
Unfortunately, no.
So I'll tell you a story real fast. I went to Comic-Con in Seattle maybe 2 years ago, prior to the Voldemort virus. And one of the panelists there was Michael Dorn. Now this isn't like Redemption Part 2 Michael Dorn. This is like he's aged. So he was skinny, and I understand he switched to vegetarianism. I don't fucking care. That's Lieutenant Worf sitting there. And I'm not going to begrudge him a steak meal if he, but I don't know about you, man. Like I've been told like I look intimidating. I don't think I'm like unfriendly or anything, but I tend to keep to myself, and I tend to have like a straight face. So when people first encounter me, they're not unless they're small kids, they don't necessarily want to share everything. So the person in front of me was like the small, cute girl, and he's laughing and he's shaking her hand and he's joking and shit. And then as soon as like he sees me, he goes straight into Lieutenant Worf. And I'm like, I'm staring at him and he's staring at me, and I'm like, thank you, sir, for teaching me about honor and duty and what it means to, protect that which is dear. And he goes, you're welcome. Period. And like, what do you say after that? Like, he signed my fucking thing and I walked away. So that's my Lieutenant Worf story.
I mean, the only similar experiences I can equate to that is I actually met a wrestler in a mall in New Jersey when I still lived there. And I had met Taz, of all people.
Okay.
And yeah, he was talking to me just a little bit, and he was very straight faced when he did it. And he said, he said, "Do you ever think about getting into wrestling?" And I said, "I thought about it." And he said, "Well, why don't you stop thinking about it and just do it?" And that was about it. It was kind of a weird experience.
Well, so it's like this person that you looked up to your whole life put you on the spot, and you're like, and I don't know. Like, I actually had that feeling like we were trying to outguy each other just on a physical level, not like on a, not like we were going to like fight or nothing, but you meet guys, you size them up,
Yeah. I mean, there was one other experience. Oh God, I almost forgot about that one. My brother is 11 years younger than me. Unfortunately, he's in a nursing home. So that's a whole different, can of worms. But
Sure.
he was younger, and we had gone out and we had seen, I want to say we watched the New Jersey Devils play in the Meadowlands when they were still there.
Okay.
So we're on the way back home, and we stopped off at one of the rest stops that had like an Arby's or something. It was an Arby's or a Roy Rogers. It was one of the two. So we go in, we get something to eat, and my brother's still sitting at the table, and we stepped outside, me and my friend. We're both 6 foot. We're both over 200 plus pounds. And we bump into ECW star Kronos. They used to be part of the Eliminators.
Oh, shit.
And I was like, oh, Kronos. And he got intimidated by the two of us. And he thought he thought we were gonna mug him or something.
Oh, so God, you probably just wanted to buy him a burger or something.
I was like, no, dude. I said, I want to ask you something. And he's like, what? And I was like, my brother in there is a huge fan. Do you think you could just come in and sign an autograph? And then he calmed down. And then it was cool. Because at first he was sizing us both up like we were getting ready to try to attack him. But yeah, he was absolutely cool about it. He came in, and he didn't have nothing but a napkin to sign on for my brother. But yeah, he signed his name on the napkin. That was a cool experience.
Yeah. Well, it's funny how guys react to each other like that. Some guys you meet and you're just like their best friend automatically, but other guys give you that feeling like, who the fuck is that? Well, and I have to report to you, Tommy. I have to confess, I wasn't exactly the best Star Trek fan recently. In climbing through articles and archives, I found out that last month in June was actually the 30th anniversary of perhaps the best episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, The Best of Both Worlds. Now, you're
All
familiar with
be
that episode,
assimilated.
right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Did you watch it live or was it like in syndication?
I want to say that I seen that one when it was first aired, but I mean that was a while ago. So, and I've watched it so many times since too. It's kind of hard to place which time I seen when. So,
I feel that same way about the Star Wars movies. Like, I have definite memories of being a little boy and watching that shit over and over on Betamax of all things. But that it was always there. And I know that there was a point in my life prior to The Next Generation and a point where I picked it up and ran with it. But I don't have that like memory of sitting down and going, holy shit, holy shit, holy shit. Nor do I have a memory of it was like one of the first big cliffhangers in that TV show.
and how many really good shows do a proper cliffhanger anymore like they used to back then?
Oh, I don't know, man. And I think maybe that show set the precedent in many ways because you have that music and then you have Patrick Stewart in the Borg thing with the laser, and he's like, resistance is futile, and Riker says fire, and then that's it. And from what I understand, if you were there that summer and you saw that, you were shitting your pants because the rumor was that Patrick Stewart was quitting the show. So you don't know if like he was going to be a Borg or if he was going to be blown up or if he would come back in season 5 as a bad guy. And it's the Will Riker show from here on out.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing about something like that, it probably scared people even more is because they became so accustomed to him being there as the father figure for the ship, so to speak. I mean, and without him, I mean, how do they keep watching the show without him?
For real. And I think at that point, Riker had grown the beard, so he seemed mature enough to captain a ship. But I'll tell you what, man, there was something about that blonde woman that didn't sit right with me. Shelby. You know what I'm talking about? And then I don't know, like there's something about Whoopi Goldberg and Patrick Stewart that works, but I don't know that Whoopi Goldberg and Riker, Jonathan Frakes, would have had the same sort of chemistry. But perhaps that chemistry wasn't allowed to develop because part 2 came out the next year.
It's pretty amazing stuff that they did back there. I mean, really, like, I can't really think of anything that really could be equatable to the Borg in any other franchise. Like, back then, I want to say. I mean, obviously now they've had plenty of different iterations of it in other franchises and other shows, but back then, was there really anything quite like that?
I mean, unless you watched like Doctor Who, they had the Cybermen, but it wasn't quite presented the same way. And I also have to say this, like as far as like effects and music and the ability to scale models and all that kind of stuff, Star Trek: The Next Generation was way ahead of the curve. And I think on this particular episode, they fucking proved it. I mean, this is probably the first episode of TNG that felt like the rest of the show would run. Because I mean, seasons 1 and 2, I'm gonna say they were okay. They were pretty good, but it was kind of like, hey, we can do Star Trek the original series with more money versus season 3, which had really good episodes like The Offspring. You
Well,
know,
I think when you get into those later ones, it's more of a theatrical feel to it at that point.
Yes, and especially with this 2-part series, like you can honestly take those 2 episodes, throw them together in a feature matinee, and people would pay money to go see it and chew popcorn. And it's still better than The Last Jedi.
You know, I still haven't watched it.
Please don't.
Let me. I'm gonna give you a brief one on that anyway, just because I can. So, I went to the theater, and initially I was excited to see a Star Wars movie again. I remember when I was a kid and I went to see Star Wars in the theater in '78 because I didn't get to see it in '77 because it wasn't released anywhere in Jersey where I lived, nowhere. So I had to wait until '78 when Lucas re-released it into theaters. And my dad took me to see it something like 8 or 9 times. And then the next year Empire was like a few less and then a few less. But when the prequels came out, I was excited as all hell to see them come back. And then when the sequels came out, I hate Disney. And I didn't even like Disney back then. But I was like, this might be good. So I went to see it and I watched that in the theater and I was completely confounded at what I saw because I knew enough about the EU that I thought that they were going to tell the story of Jaina and Jason.
Yeah.
That's what it felt like. And they didn't. They completely threw everything of the EU out the window and they just ran with something that was similar in concept.
Well, yeah. And I don't know if that was to avoid paying royalties to the original creators, the authors who, number one, grew up loving that shit, but then number two, had enough inspiration and foresight to contribute to that lore and build upon it. It's a funny thing, and then throw in people who want to hire based on political affiliation, and then you find yourself in quite the pickle.
Yeah, and when it's nonsense, I mean, it's supposed to be escapism. It's supposed to be something that you look to for enlightenment or something you look to inspire you. And they want to take that away and they want to browbeat you over the head with this. Well, you need to think this way. You need to think this way. You need to think this way because this is what is important to us right here, right now. Well, I don't care about right here, right now. I want to care about what's happening in a galaxy far away that's beyond all this nonsense that we're living through right now. And I think these people forget that kind of stuff. But yeah, I walked out of TFA and I was confused. I was disappointed. And at that point, I didn't watch any more Star Wars in the theaters.
Well, yeah. And then we harken back to things like what was this? 1991, The Best of Both Worlds, 1990, 1980, 1989, maybe. Back when things were inspiring and edge of your seat kind of stuff and nothing sticky as far as here's how you should think. It's like, no, here's the fucking reality that we're dealing with, and here's this guy who's trying to stop you from growing and expanding. What are you going to do about it based on this level of technology? Go. I don't want to be taken a Canto bite. That's bullshit. And that's part of the movie you don't even want to hear about. But so, and just to say, as far as plot fallacies, why would Luke Skywalker fuck off to a backwater planet and leave a map to himself just in case? Yeah, if I want to be left alone, you're not going to find me, dude.
Yeah, exactly. He would have just disappeared. But then again, you know what? Yoda kind of disappeared. But then again, he didn't really leave any information about that either. it was through the spirit of Obi-Wan that he found out where to find him.
It's a trip. So this concept of the Borg, I think that this is probably the second or third episode that they were alluded to, but it really cast a shadow upon the rest of Star Trek. They were the ultimate bad guys, save from omnipotent people like Q. You know,
I
what
mean,
do you?
even as big of a threat as the Romulans were in some of the earlier seasons, they paled in comparison to what the Borg represented. Because the Borg
Yeah,
just didn't represent conquest. They represented an entire history-changing event for anybody that they came across.
yeah, like a world-ending annihilation, and you're gonna have your individuality erased, and you're gonna be plugged into the machine.
A square cube of SJWs. Oh,
You know, and it's interesting because wrong think would be punished by both, wouldn't it?
yeah.
You will be assimilated. Resistance is futile. 30 years ago. Jeez.
I mean, I picked that up and I ran with it when I did my channel, when I changed, started changing formats, and I started adding like the guinea pigs in my in my videos. And that I kind of ran with that, resistance is futile. You will be assimilated into the guinea pig collective.
Yeah, isn't that nuts? Yeah. So can you enlighten us about that guinea pig tale? How did that come about? Is that specialty or is it just a joke? Or?
Well, I mean, the whole thing with the guinea pigs is I actually do have guinea pigs, and I've had a few that were, quite personable, especially one in particular. I had this one called Jackson, and he had a big personality for a little guy. And he was sad that the guinea pig that was there prior, so we wound up getting another one. And then when Jackson died and the other one was lonely, we got more. So it just kind of snowballed. It didn't end. So now I got 3 of them. But like the whole thing of the collective, I can't even exactly say how it started, but what I initially did when I first started modding for channels or just popping up in chats, I wound up creating the icon of Jackson. That's who I have there now.
Okay.
And the first thing I started doing is I used arrows. So if you ever see me modding on any stream, you always see me put arrows in front and after almost everything I say, as far as like plugging somebody's channel or something like that.
Yeah.
That started because I was on somebody's stream and I said that they had failed their own live stream, and I was putting arrows in the chat to kind of like be like the Green Arrow from the Arrowverse. So that snowballed to me creating a green background with the arrow on my guinea pig. And at some point, I told people I'm going to turn you into a guinea pig. And they said, "Oh, what are you going to assimilate us?" And it just kind of ran from there. And I said, "Yes, all will be assimilated." So it was just completely happenstance in a chat that it started.
Yeah. Well, that's a trip, man. Because and since we were just talking about the Borg collective, I thought it was like a play on that, or maybe it was like you're going to be like the rodent minister in Doomcock's new regime.
Well, it definitely was inspired by the whole Borg collective thing. I mean, obviously the way I word it and everything, and then I do pictures where I actually have them with like the Borg face masks on, like Locutus and stuff like that. So
right on, man, right on. Well, so did you were you able to see any of the original Star Wars movies in the theater?
Oh yeah, all of them.
All of them. Because by the time I saw them in the theaters, George Lucas had already special editioned them.
Yeah, I seen all the original ones. Here's a funny one. You might find this interesting. Do you remember what a Super 8 is?
Yes.
Okay, my father had Super 8, and he only had one reel for the original New Hope, and it was towards the end with the Death Star and them on the Falcon shooting down the TIE fighters.
Okay.
He used to play that for me all the time with the Super 8 reel. So,
oh wow.
Like even yeah, even after it was out of the theater and before it was like on free TV, and that was before, obviously before the real videotape craze. Yeah, I had the Super 8 that he would pop out all the time and play for me.
Well, and I had no idea that Super 8 would have like canisters of movies. From what I
Oh,
understood, Super 8 was like just like the cheesy home video like you would see on the Wonder
no, no,
Years or
no.
like
Oh, yeah, they had all
Cubs
kinds of
or
stuff.
something.
They had
Yeah.
all, yeah. My dad had he still got it too because they're all sitting there somewhere in storage in that house. He's got the old Super 8 reels for Gone with the Wind, Logan's Run, old Woody Woodpecker cartoons, the old 70s Spider-Man cartoons.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Um, I'm trying to think what else he had. He had a few other ones, but those are the ones that I remember off the top of my head because those are the ones he would play all the time.
Oh, that's a trip. So in addition to seeing them in the theaters, you had your own way of seeing them at home. Did you just have Star Wars, or did you have Empire and Jedi?
No, he only had the second half of Star Wars, and I still don't know why he only had the second half of it or the ending half because I'm not sure how many reels it was broken into. Because I know the Gone with the Wind was broken into at least 3 reels, if I'm not mistaken, and I think Star Wars was broken into 2 reels for some reason. Gone with the Wind might have even been four reels. It's been a long time since I seen where he had them and what they look like, but. Yeah, the Star Wars one was only the second half, but I mean, even then, I mean, it was still nice to be able, anytime I want to know that he could pop the Super 8 out and play part of Star Wars for me. That was really cool.
Well, that's a trip. So I didn't have Super 8. I had Betamax, like we were saying. And this was like my dad's like, you don't touch this unless I'm here, and if I catch you like even breathing on it, I'm gonna string you up by your ankles and beat you on the side of the house kind of thing.
Well, they were extremely expensive when they first came out.
When they first came out, and this is the top loading Betamax, right? So it was like this big like silver machine that you could see all the guts inside if you looked into the window, and the tapes were just tiny. Geez, I don't know, like maybe like a little bit bigger than a Pop Tart if you've never seen a Betamax tape.
Oh, I remember the Betamax. I remember the old. Oh God, we had one video store. They used to carry both Betamax and VHS. And
Yeah,
I want to say early on, I want to say Blockbuster did too.
they may have. But Star Wars, aside from Swedish porn, was one of the things that my dad had on Betamax, which is a different stream. We're not going to talk about that now. But I remember seeing Star Wars, and by the time it had come to home video, and this is in the early 80s, it already said Episode 4, A New Hope. It didn't just say Star Wars like you saw it in the theater. And even as a kid, I was like, Episode 4, where's 1, 2, and 3?
Yeah, I mean, everybody thought that. I mean, nobody ever thought that the story was actually starting in the middle.
Yeah. And it wasn't until I was older and read about what was in Lucas's head. But I remember thinking, like, God damn, this movie is so long about deserts. Like, when's shit gonna happen? But then when it happened, it was amazing.
I mean, I look back on some of the early viewings of that, and I liked it from beginning to end. It was one of those few movies that I really didn't have any problem with whatsoever.
Yeah. And maybe that's just me watching it as a 4-year-old or whatever.
Yeah, I would have been, oh God. When I first seen it in the theaters, I want to say I was like about 7 or so.
Oh, that would have been better.
7
Yeah.
or 6 or 7. And no, I was 6. I would have been 6. I was 6 years old when I seen it. So
Yeah. Then of course Empire comes out. I'm a big fan of Yoda. When I was a little boy, I actually had like a Yoda t-shirt. And Return of the Jedi comes out, and you see Anakin's face, and then you see Sebastian Shaw, Force Ghost. Thank you very much.
Hmm.
And then that was like the last word we had for a long fucking time. You know, even Mark Hamill said we had a beginning, we had a middle, and we had an end. You know, so what else could you do for shit 20 years except read comic books and read novels?
Yep.
Did you read a lot of novels, Tommy?
Quite a few of them. Quite a few of them. Granted,
Yeah.
I didn't get all of them, but yeah. Read the Bane trilogy. I've read now this one I don't think is ever talked about enough is the Bounty Hunter Wars trilogy.
Oh shit. Okay.
The Han Solo trilogy. I used to have a copy of that. Unfortunately, that got stolen. Darth Plagueis.
Yes.
Knights of the Old or is that just listed as Old Republic Revan?
Sure. Yeah. So those are all, and I think the only thing is Thrawn that you didn't mention.
Yeah, I didn't really read that.
Thrawn is a great. So it's definitely like the sort of sequel that we probably should have seen, but that we weren't given. And parts of it have been mined into Star Wars Rebels, but all those stories are the major ones of the EU, which carried Star Wars. Aside from, geez, what did we have? We had video games. Do you remember in the arcade there was that video game? It was like a big fucking machine, and you could fight Darth Vader at one point, and you could, you know, fly a X-wing. And
yeah, I do remember it because they were almost like the race car boots that you would sit in. And I do recall something like that with the X-Wings or something, but I never actually had a chance to play it myself just because usually back then the arcades were so like filled with people. I mean, that's the one thing that people miss today, like the old arcades like that. I mean, that was just a lot of fun.
Oh, no shit. Like when Street Fighter 2 came out, you had to stand in line.
Oh, do you remember the original Street Fighter with Gen and everything?
Oh yeah.
The last place I seen that was in a local bar before when I still lived in Trenton. There was a local bar that still had that old Street Fighter game sitting in their bar.
Yeah, dude, it's a trip. And again, just to give you a sense for the time that we're in, that's like back when I had to carry a quarter to call my mom, you know. And I had to be back before dark. If the street lights came on, my mom would kick my ass.
Hey, Scott. If he's still there.
Oh, is he? Well,
He
hell.
was.
Yeah. Well, so again, in digging through the internet, I came upon an interesting article right here. The Sith Rule of Two broke the Star Wars universe from CBR.com, our not so favorite website, by Irving Vita, June 25th. The Rule of Two broke Star Wars by limiting the potential pool of force wielding villains who aren't connected to Palpatine. Okay. So just to kind of glaze over this, the Rule of Two is an ancient Sith directive first mentioned by Yoda in Star Wars: The Phantom Menace. No, it wasn't, but that's cute. That's the movies. Always two there are, no more, no less, he explained, a master and an apprentice. In contrast to the myriad Jedi, the Sith operate in secret due to their scarce numbers. The directive prioritizes a limited number of active Sith at one time, ensuring the Sith Order's ultimate survival and allowing them to slowly gain influence. However, this rule ultimately limited the storytelling capabilities of the Star Wars universe, according to this guy.
Nonsense.
The Rule of Two was created by legendary Sith Lord Darth Bane. Hail Darth Bane. 1,000 years ago. So it was created in the year 1020. Did you know that, Tommy?
This guy's all over it, ain't he?
I know. 1020, just 60 years before the Normans invaded Saxony. The Sith Rule of Two. Okay. So this right away strikes me as the type of article that was written by somebody who was tasked to write like a historical Star Wars article. If you had never, if all you saw was like the movies and you were tasked to go to like Wikipedia and look up some shit about the Sith, you might shit out something like this. What do you think, Tommy?
It's pretty pathetic. It's just bad journalism at its finest, you know. I mean, seriously. I mean, the whole thing is it never really limited anything because yeah, you could talk about the rule of two, and the rule of two actually pertained to a Sith, an actual master teaching an apprentice everything he knew. It doesn't limit anything because there could be other force wielders out there who worked in the dark side. They were just not trained as Sith. That's the only difference. I mean, obviously, this numbskull just doesn't even know what he's talking about. He's like picking up a story and, well, I'm going to write a hit piece on these people because they limited and they did. Yeah, shut up. You just sound like a fool.
Well, he sounds like a paid piper. You know, this is a guy who obviously never read the Bane trilogy nor Darth Plagueis, because I would say that Darth Plagueis described the Sith rule of two, but also had a room for other dark side force users. But there's also that dynamic where there is a Dark Lord of the Sith to embody the power of the dark side and an apprentice to crave the power of the dark side. And they're constantly trying to kill each other one way or another. So you're either proving yourself worthy or you die, and then the mantle is passed.
I think in a lot of the other novels, they touched on other force users too that delved in the dark side.
Yeah, well, even in a Darth Bane, Darth Zana had that like twerpy Jedi dude who was not really committed to the dark side, but she kind of like cajoled him along, and then she ended up kind of killing Bane in a way.
Wait a minute. Don't forget that guy beforehand.
Yeah,
there was that guy that had all the holocrons and everything.
Oh yeah. So I mean, you see that, and even into the modern era where Palpatine and Vader are constantly going about that, and you see that Vader never really went in earnest against Palpatine until he realized Luke.
And he wanted to turn Luke to the dark side.
Yeah.
So, I mean, wouldn't that just be breaking the rule of two if you could never have more than two? I mean, obviously, this guy didn't even watch the original trilogy. He knows nothing.
Nah, I don't really trust CBR as far as I can throw my computer. So.
And, well, hold on. There's one more, and I don't know why I didn't think of it right off the bat, but really, there's one thing in the original trilogy that just throws his stupid idea right out the window. When in Empire, he's sitting there, I'm pretty sure, was it Empire or was it the beginning of Return of the Jedi? When he tells him, can he be turned? He would be a powerful ally.
Yeah.
Didn't say he was actually going to make him a Sith, but he was going to turn him to the dark side to be a dark side user at the very least.
Well, that's an interesting way to look at it, because I honestly, knowing what I know now and having read the EU and all that kind of shit, I thought that both Vader and Palpatine were thinking this is a potential Sith, so I have to kill this other Sith in order to have this new blood come in. Some crazy shit, man. The article continues. For the most part, the movies in the Skywalker saga has followed this rule to the letter. Each trilogy has a master Sith Lord manipulating events in the background, while an apprentice directly confronts the heroes of the story. The rule of two was basically an in-universe explanation for the dynamic established by Emperor Palpatine and Darth Vader in the original trilogy. Nonetheless, the continued use of this format has diminished the universe by relating every Sith to Palpatine in one way or another. Well, whose fucking fault is that, Tommy?
It was never really explained to that, because can you really say that Dooku was relegated back to Palpatine? He had pretty much come into his own without Palpatine, because he walked away from the Jedi Order. Now, granted, he didn't survive it, and then you had other dark side users like the Night Sisters.
Right. And then it continues, for example, while Palpatine is still under the tutelage of his master Darth Plagueis, he kidnapped Darth Maul from Mother Townsend to be his apprentice. When Maul seemingly died on Naboo, Palpatine made the former Jedi Count Dooku his new apprentice. Dooku violated the rule of two himself when he took several apprentices throughout the Clone Wars. So he's talking of Asajj Ventress and General Grievous.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I wouldn't say that they were full-fledged apprentices, because perhaps if this is the way that the apprentice challenges the master, where he gets another dark side user to overthrow the master so he can take the mantle, and then the person who helps him can be the apprentice. But I never got a sense from Dooku that he was able to ever take Palpatine in any real sense.
No.
It seemed like Palpatine used him.
Well, I think he like I said, Dooku had already fallen. He was in a state of discontent with the Jedi Order and walked away from it. And he had already sunk to the dark side prior to Sidious ever even really picking up on him. I mean, they even talked about it in the novel Plagueis, where he sensed the dark side in him.
Yeah,
because they were at a dinner. It was like a big gathering dinner that they had, and he sensed it.
Was there too? Yeah.
Yep.
Interesting. So it says Dooku's first apprentice was Asajj Ventress, an assassin. While Ventress wasn't considered a true Sith, she lacked an official title. She yearned to be one and was trained by Dooku. After betraying Ventress, Dooku took a Savage Opress before he joined Darth Maul's side. I don't remember that, but I'll look into that.
They covered that mostly in the Clone Wars, and they did touch on it in a few comic books.
Huh. So then it says Dooku even temporarily took Quinlan Boss as his apprentice in the novel Dark Disciple. That's one I haven't read. Quinlan Boss is a familiar name, though. And of course, Anakin Skywalker would later join Palpatine's side in Revenge of the Sith when he became Vader. So, in one way or another, all these characters are at least tangentially related to Emperor Palpatine. And in a universe as seemingly expansive as Star Wars, this minimizes the conflict. It's rare to see a force-wielding villain who operates outside of Palpatine and his bubble. When Supreme Leader Snoke first appeared in the sequel trilogy, he seemed to be an independent figure that wasn't related to the Sith Lord at all. However, by the release of The Rise of Skywalker, Snoke was revealed to literally be a product manufactured by Palpatine himself in a lab. Also, Palpatine was revealed to be the voice manipulating Kylo Ren since his childhood, so the Emperor was responsible for Ren's fall to the dark side as well. Tommy, do you give a shit about Kylo Ren?
Not even in the least.
Okay.
He's a very uninteresting character. I mean, the moment he took his helmet off, or should I say it got knocked off in The Force Awakens, I was like, okay, yep, kind of lost everything there.
Well, so the point of the CBR article to me is to try to justify I don't know, to acknowledge Palpatine's presence, to say that it was unnecessary in the sequel trilogy, but then to try to say, well, yeah, you're pissed off about this, but not because of the reason that you think. It's because of this bullshit Sith rule of two that was invented in the year 1020 AD.
Well, the funny thing is you know, and you get some of these people that talk out about this stuff, and they actually trash the EU constantly. And you know, if Lethal Lightning was here, he knows about some of those twits, and they can all suck a fuzzy guinea butt. Anyway, they they talk about the EU's trash, and it's this, that, and the other thing. But they talk about how great the Clone Wars is. And in the Clone Wars, they keep talking about the Rule of Two as well, as long as, you know, as well as they did in the movies. And where did the Rule of Two really start? It started in the novelizations. So once again, you're looking back at something that started in the EU. And I think that this guy's article is just more or less, he's trying to throw more shade at the EU, saying that, you know, you need to do away with that stuff. I mean, that's what it seems like to me. Maybe I'm just looking at it through tinted glasses, and that's just what I'm seeing, but that's what it feels like.
Yeah. And again, it's just like Disney wants to disavow everything that happened prior to 2012, but they certainly want to jump on its nuts and then squeeze it for what it's worth and whatever era we're alive in now. Yeah, it's crazy. I think that once upon a time, if you wanted to work at Lucasfilm, you had to be familiar with the material. But nowadays, if you want to work in Lucasfilm, you just have to vote a certain way, wear a certain tie when you go to the polls, and make sure you check your gender.
And then follow the agenda.
Follow the agenda. That's quite crazy. Well, I got one more area, one more base I want to cover for tonight. Again, I want to thank Tommy for coming out. You are certainly the best and hardest working mod. I see you all over the place in the Fandom Menace. You care to shout out a couple channels, man?
Hey, Scott, you know, I really like Scott, but, you know, one of the guys that I've actually been promoting recently has been Culture Casino. Culture Casino is a great guy. And you know what? I mean, every time I show up somewhere, this guy is looking to promote me. Like, he'll send in super chats to promote me on other people's channels instead of like getting some credit for himself. The guy, he's unbelievable. I mean, he's a wonderful person. Another person I'm just going to throw a little shout out to is Macany90. Guy is a pretty incredible artist. Have you seen any of his stuff?
I saw him in a live stream the other day, but I have not checked out any of his artwork. Maybe I'll.
I dropped the link for his Teespring.
Okay.
In the live chat. So,
yeah. So we'll go ahead and highlight that. Teespring, Mackie 2. I'll see if I can pull that up on the.
Yeah, I feel actually very fortunate to meet some of the great people that are part of the community, you know. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. It's not always just entirely just the Fandom Menace. It's people outside of the Fandom Menace that I've become friends with that are incredibly awesome. You know, I mean, there's a lot of good people out there. It's just a shame that some people feel the need to just draw lines and then, you know, go to war. It is what it is, though.
What makes me wonder what that is. Is that some sort of a?
I look at it this way, and this is the way I think of it. It's tribalism.
Yeah.
Everybody has their own little cliques, and, you know, everybody gets separated by their cliques, and they feel like the need to defend each clique is my clique is better than your clique. Even though you're all supposed to be part of the same group, they're fighting for dominance. So who's the better one? Instead of saying, hey, well, we could all work together to make all of us better, they just want to just promote their own little clique, and it's just a shame. It's counterproductive, and they just don't say it.
Okay, so this is some of your buddies' T-shirts. The Demon Sword. We got like a hot little chick here. All right, got a kind of Harley Quinn vibe on her. Little bit of anime vibe on her. She's got a big old sword between her legs. She just killed something. Nice.
Ain't nothing wrong with that.
Hey, I'm all about that life too. So yeah, go ahead and check that out. Tommy runs defense for a lot of good channels out there. So go ahead and check out his YouTube too. You should throw that link in there. So, and then there's Culture Casino, of course.
I mean, there's so many really good people. I could sit there and name people all day long, but I mean, I can't say enough good things about Culture. And Culture really just kind of came out of the blue for me. Maybe I want to say 2 or 3 months ago or so, maybe somewhere around there. And he has been a staunch supporter of mine. Like, telling everybody you really need to check him out. You really need to stop by Tommy. Tommy's always helping everybody out. Like, I mean, I never asked for that when I started modding for people. I just did it because I wanted to help certain people out, And it kind of snowballed from there. And then, I found a lot of other people I liked helping out, and actually got to a point where I actually got drawn in too many different directions. And now I can't help everybody out. And I got to kind of almost pick and choose who I'm going to be able to help.
Correct. And it's one of those things, like, you want to, Stephen Walton, he always says we rise together, but at some point you have to help yourself too. So it's good to be a part of something. And like we said, tribalism, the Phantom Menace was like a big, huge tag that we could all jump on, and we all felt a certain way about what we were handed and told to like. And when we didn't like it, treated a certain way. But within that, we all have our little niche, and it's like this multifaceted gem. It's who am I inside this thing? It's its own microcosm. So,
well, because of the way I am and my personality is I do not take I don't want to say direction, because I could take direction from people of saying, hey, you should really do this, you're doing that wrong. I can take direction, I can take criticism, but what I can't take is for somebody just barking orders at me. I do not take orders at all. I am very independent in the way I think, and sometimes that rubs people the wrong way. But when I always talk about what I am and what I represent, I have never at one point have I just say, oh, I am the Phantom Menace. I've never done it. I've always said I'm the guinea pig menace, because that's what I ran with. Like, I'm my own distinct menace because of it, because I just don't want to. I refuse to fall into the tribalism aspect of it.
Yeah, and even within that, there's like this personality cultism, and whether you're for this person or that person, or against this channel or that channel, or this guy said one thing that you didn't like, it tends to turn into a popularity contest instead of what it should be, which is entertainment critique. And that's not to say conduct yourself any certain way. That's just my observation. And then with smaller channels like this, you have the freedom to achieve your own vision. Especially because there's only one person watching. It's probably my mom. And then I know, like, I'll have 100 people listening to this tomorrow at work while they're swinging the hammer, doing some bullshit that they don't want to do, and listening to some shit that sounds true in their ear.
Yeah, I mean, I really like a lot of the people that are in the Phantom Menace, and I completely back. I don't even know how many people that are in it. But at the same time, I mean, there's a lot of people within it that just they can't see past that tribalism of their own group. And it really is a shame. It really is a shame, because when this whole thing started off initially, everybody was backing everybody, and everybody was in each other's corners. And at some point, like, people in a lunchroom going off to different tables because they had their little cliques, that's kind of like what a lot of people in the Phantom Menace have started doing. They
Well,
started
sure.
going off into their own corners of the lunchroom.
Sure. You know, and the only thing that I could say is, as far as advice goes, is check out all the different channels in the Phantom Menace and feel what resonates with you, run with it, but don't discount another voice just because the dude on the channel that you like said that he was smelly or something. You know, go see what they have to say, and if it's bullshit, then don't listen to it. It's really that simple. But like where it goes to personal attacks and that's like a overinvestment in energy. You know, to me, like I don't know about you, Tommy. If I don't like somebody, they're dead to me. They're not gonna get advertisement. They're not gonna rent my headspace. I'm just gonna fucking move on. You know.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, you know what though? I mean, I would like to give props to like most of those people that are in the fourth wave that, you know, they've stood behind a lot of people when everybody else has kind of dropped them, you know.
Oh yeah.
I've had a few moments where I've gotten to some heated discussions with people, and some people took it the wrong way, and then there's other people that in the fourth wave that just stood up for me and said something. Or I mean, even like people in the Dark Council that stood up because, you know, something that was said and was taken out of context, and maybe somebody got hot about it. And I've had people stand up for me, and they said, well, no, he's not like that, because they've actually, you know, chatted with me in private or something like that, and they kind of understand where I'm coming from. I mean,
well, yeah, and this whole like social media thing, especially when you're on the Twatterverse, it's like a retarded version of the telephone game. You know, you get like a post of a retweeted comment of something that somebody didn't like in the first place, and then all of a sudden you're playing interference for a perception you never had to begin with.
yeah. Well, yeah. This is what I think about Twitter and some of the ridiculousness on there when it comes to stuff where people started like jumping into other people's fights and everything like that, and they don't even know what the original fight was about. It reminds me of Johnny Dangerously. I know this grapevine. That's what it's like. I know this grapevine. The story changed from point A to point B. By the time you got it and you got offended and you decided to jump in, you don't even know what the original thing was about. You're just jumping in just to jump on, you know?
Yeah. Well, and the anonymity that the internet and social media allows you, especially if you hide behind an icon, as I say, as a crystal skull, it emboldens a lot of people, and even to the point where people are creating fake accounts just so that they can not be their prime account, but then go around the ass side of the house and be a complete jerk. You know, you can say whatever you want because you're not yourself. You're, you know, fun guy 112.
Yeah, it's just sad. I mean, I would have a camera, but number one, I don't have a webcam.
Yeah.
And when I try to use my camera on my phone most of the time, and I've done it a few times, I've done it like I attacked the troll on Thomas Gilkey's channel. I'm not even going to mention his name because he's not worth the effort to mention, but I went on camera for that, and hey, this is me. I'm really me, and this is who I say I am. So, you know, if you don't like it, you can, you know, where you can go. But
yeah. And we want to say hail the Gilkman. Go ahead and subscribe to him. He's one of those boots on the ground that I remembered from before the High Council was a thing. You know, you always saw a couple of names in the chats and every fucking stream. He was one of them.
Thomas takes the time and get around and check all the channels out. I mean, there's not to say that there's not a whole bunch of people that do that, but yeah, Thomas has been doing that for a long time. And he has no problem with bringing anybody just about onto his channel.
Yeah. So if you're a growing channel, fucking hit him up. He's a good-hearted guy. Yeah. So I wonder, Tommy, are you an X-Men fan?
Oh, the original X-Men? Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Did you watch the cartoon and shit?
Yeah. Yeah. Geez, do I still have an episode or two on DVD? I forget. I used to have a DVD with a few of the older cartoons on it. I don't know if I still have it anymore, but Man, I remember like all those early comics and everything too, like even before the cartoon came out. Like I don't I don't know if you remember this. This was in the 80s, like mid 80s. They were doing Marvel trading cards, and then they were also started doing like mail away shirts through Marvel. And one of the shirts that they did was a Wolverine shirt where it was a skeleton, basically.
Oh,
Like, but it was torn in half. So it was like the bottom of vertebrae of his skeleton and then the top half with the rib cage and the claws out and everything.
oh,
Like,
crazy. Well, I've seen a couple things like that. See, because I read the comics, and I'm just gonna go ahead and go on cam. I don't know if you can tell, man. I'm a bit of a Wolverine fan.
just a bit. Schnick.
Schnick. So, my bag was reading the comics, obviously, and then watching the cartoons. And one of the things that I remembered was, there was this time where he was in a volcano, and all of his flesh was ripped away, and it was just his metal covered bones, and he regenerated from like a drop of blood. Then I saw where this fan had like a anatomical skeleton that was covered in chrome or something, but they put the claws on. So this is even different than that, huh?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I found this interesting article from cbr.com. Again, not my favorite article, but I don't know, man. These guys like to sow dissent, but I thought this was an interesting exercise into this guy's cranium. How Wolverine's original murderous nature divided Marvel creators. Here's how the question of Wolverine's murderous nature subtitle and headline, they're like the same fucking thing. Brandon Zachary, June 29th. Okay. With this classic Frank Miller illustration. So Chris Claremont and Frank Miller got together and really helped define Wolverine's character, because he was kind of like a plot device up until they decided to flesh out his background.
Yeah. His first appearance was in the Incredible Hulk.
That is true, where he was sent as an assassin, but the fight was interrupted by the Wendigo. Yeah, so
They did I'm pretty sure. Yeah, they did a retelling of that, like a cartoon retelling of that, like maybe I don't know, 7 years ago tops, if it was even that many years ago. I don't know.
And I thought I saw something kind of like that. I know that it was like Wolverine versus Hulk, but I don't know if the Wendigo was there. I thought I saw like Omega Red and the weapon.
They did have the Wendigo in it.
Okay.
Because initially, I think the way they were trying to tell it in the story, instead of Wolverine going after the Hulk, Wolverine was initially there to try to hunt down Wendigo, but Hulk got in the way.
Ah, crazy. I'm gonna have
that's
to
how
look
that's how the retelling they did in the cartoon that they did.
Okay. Well, I'll have to look out for that. Do you remember where you saw that, Tommy?
God, I can't remember offhand, because the first time I seen it was actually when I used to be on Xbox Live all the time, and it was a free download.
All right. So, I'm sure it's out there. I'm sure the inventive.
I want to say it might be on Netflix still.
Okay.
It's a possibility.
Well, we'll start there, and I'm sure if you're ingenious enough, you can come upon it somehow in a way that this channel won't necessarily vocally endorse. So it says Wolverine has always stood out from the rest of his allies on the X-Men for his willingness to use lethal measures when the need arises. It's been an element of the character since his inception and has been explored multiple times over the years. But it turns out that direction for Wolverine was actually fairly controversial amongst some Marvel creators. Early direction of Wolverine actually divided opinion between the creators working on X-Men at the time, and then Marvel's editor-in-chief, who wanted Logan to never be overtly murderous, but to always be on the verge of that, even if it went against his character development. So that's an interesting concept. The Wolverine that we got has no bones about killing people, but the editor at the time wanted him to almost cross the line, but then stop himself. How do you think that would have made him different?
I mean, I don't really think it would have made him that much more different because they always hinted at how dark he was. So,
Well, and it's crazy too because there's always people like the Punisher who full out murders people. So Marvel anti-heroes have always been around. It's just like, why did they have this problem with Logan specifically? Maybe it was a sales figure. I don't know.
yeah, well, I mean, most of that stuff had to do with marketing anyway. And of course, if you go too far over the line, you can't market it to the normal audience that you would be marketing to if it's too violent, you know?
Yeah. Well, so while other younger members of the X-Men had a strong sense of morality to their actions, Wolverine was content to kill an enemy if the need arose. A notable early example of this difference occurred in Uncanny X-Men number 116 by Chris Claremont and John Byrne. Quite the team. Yes. While traveling through the Savage Land, a group of X-Men encounters a guard. While Nightcrawler plans to use his powers to bring down the guard without anyone noticing, Wolverine casually sneaks over and is implied to murder the guard. So here's a panel right here. And I guess off panel, and you can see them looking at the dead body, perhaps. Mein Gott. And Storm's about to yak. Coast is clear. Follow me. But don't you think like that's part of what the team needed? Somebody who wasn't afraid to look at the risk and decide whether or not something had to be removed from the obstacle course?
Well, I mean, that's the problem, though. I mean, they don't want to have to sit there and look at the, or at least the people that are offended by this, they don't want to look at the idea that, you know, somebody is there to get their hands dirty, that somebody is there to do the dirty work that nobody else wants to or should have to. I mean, this is just part of society. I mean, look what happens when you send people off to war. Somebody's got to go off to war and somebody's got to get their hands dirty. It's not going to be these silly little offended people that are hiding behind their little banners and everything, protesting all over the place.
I'm so glad you brought that up, man, because there's been a lot of far leftist people who want to abolish the police and abolish the military and basically pretend like there's no evil in the world and that everybody could lay down their arms and go to bed safely and nobody's going to come and carry off your daughter or your sister, you know. But there's always going to be did you ever see that movie American Sniper where they said it's yeah, so one of the big quotes from it was there are sheep and there are wolves and there are sheep dogs. Yeah. So and this is interesting. That's one of the things that I found psychologically compelling about Logan is that I don't think he necessarily wants to murder outright. Just he sees that there are certain people whose right to exist on planet Earth has been revoked by their choices, and they just happen to come across them at the wrong time, or perhaps the right time. And it's interesting to me that somebody as moral as Professor Xavier would harbor somebody like Logan and just past the point that he's a mutant, perhaps one of the older mutants, but have a known killer on his team and to employ him as such if shit got that bad.
Well, and this is just my take on it, but I never thought that Wolverine had the intent that, hey, I'm going to go out and I'm just going to murder people today. I think it was just part of his savage brutality. I mean, that was just who he was.
Yes.
He was more, I mean, he was initially when he was found, he was more animal than human. So it was just in his nature to be able to do those things. It wasn't like he had the intent of, I'm going to go out and I'm just going to murder these people just to murder them. It was never the intent.
No,
He was more, how can I put it? He was more of a force of nature.
Yeah. Well, and it's also like that abused person kind of thing, like the dog you kick too much and then it turns vicious in order to protect itself. Logan's backstory, like once it was fleshed out, he was experimented on by government agencies because of his healing factor, which is ultimately how he came to possess his adamantium skeleton. Now, given I don't think he was like the most cheerful or friendly of motherfuckers, but I don't think like his first choice would be to kill. You would have to be trying to kill him or somebody he loves before he would flip that switch until his conditioning came in. And then even after that, there were large tracts of his life that he couldn't remember.
Yeah, how much of it was conditioning?
Yeah. And we even saw like I don't know if it was that cartoon or the one that I saw where they suggested that some of his memories were actually staged and implanted, and Professor X had a hard time separating what was true and what was fiction because of the conditioning, but also because of the unique nature of adamantium.
Just real quick.
Yeah.
That Hulk versus one.
Yeah.
It was from 2009.
2009. Did you find it on IMDb?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to see if I can track it down real fast. Hulk 2009. Wolverine and the X-Men. Hulk versus.
Yes.
Hit number 2. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, there's a picture, yeah.
Awesome.
I think there was a couple stories, like they had the one where he was against Wolverine, and then they also had one where he went against Thor.
That's pretty awesome. Okay. Well, if that's on Netflix, go ahead and track it down. This is good stuff. If not, you can order it from Amazon, I'm pretty sure. And we appreciate your thoroughness, Tommy.
Working behind the scenes. I got the guinea pigs looking for this stuff.
He's got his feelers out there. Well, okay, so here's another example, and I don't think we have to read through the whole article because they're citing these panels. So we have here Logan showing up with Mariko Yashida, his ill-fated Japanese lover. Nightcrawler pops out of nowhere, plants a little kiss on her cheek, and then he swipes at him, but Nightcrawler disappears.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this looks like Logan knows that Nightcrawler is going to disappear, so he's like, fuck off. He's not trying to kill him necessarily, but it's kind of like if you were pissing me off and I elbowed you in the shoulder, but he knows that Nightcrawler can disappear, so he doesn't mind a snicked slash.
Yeah, it's done more for show.
Yeah. So do you think this is like his murderous nature? Do you think this is him being silly?
Yeah, it's just him just being irritated, but I don't think it's being murderous. It's just, it's a warning. It's like a warning.
Sure. And then we see the true size of Logan. We got Colossus back here. What is Colossus, like 7 feet tall? So Wolverine's like 5 something.
Wolverine is 5'3".
5'3". There you go. Hugh Jackman was much taller. I think he was 60.
Yeah, Wolverine in the original comics was 5'3", 195 pounds. And the only reason I know that to the T is because I actually have some of those old Marvel trading cards that I was talking about.
Like the
I have,
baseball. Yeah.
yeah, I have a whole bunch of them. I think I have almost two complete series of the Marvel ones, and I have an almost complete series of the DC.
You know, and I want to say like the 100-something pounds was even like the pre-adamantium weight, and like with adamantium, he was closer to 300.
Well, I think they said in that one 195 because I mean, you look at somebody that's 5'3" to be 195 pounds.
You'd be pretty fucking big.
They would have to be humongous. They would have to be humongous because they talk about somebody like even my height at 6'1". They say a healthy weight is, I want to say, around like 175 or something.
Sure.
But I mean, I weigh 220, so
now is that all muscle?
Mostly.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, not being able to get around like I used to because of my back and everything like that. And, you know, I'm not quite as toned up as I used to be. So,
well, yeah. So I'm 5'10" and I'm about $190, and I'm not gonna say that I don't have a little gut, but most of it's muscle. You know, I probably have like 15 extra pounds. That's just pure fat. But you know, you move around, you're an active man.
but I mean, I had a friend who was, I want to say he was like, he was around 5'5", 5'6" or so at the most. And when he was lifting, because we all used to lift weights when we were younger, he had actually gotten kind of big. And even when he got big, he was only like maybe 135, 145 pounds. So you're talking about somebody that's smaller than him. So, I mean, in order for Wolverine to be 195 pounds pre-adamantium, he would have had to have been like buff, like, I don't know, like
Well, that's
like at least like the Punisher or Captain America or something. You know, Wolverine was never really that big of a character.
what I always read was that his healing factor. So he involved himself in, like, he was a logger and he was in the military and all that kind of shit. So as soon as he ripped up his muscle, it immediately remodeled, and he was always just naturally toned. But then when adamantium got introduced into his system, it had to work overtime to, number one, support it, the weight of metal on your bones, but then kind of fight back against metal poisoning and all that kind of stuff. So and as shitty as this movie is, Wolverine Origins, when he sits down on the bike and the bike goes, oh, I think that was at least a truthful illustration of a man with a metal skeleton, what it would do to the environment. Plus, even in the first X-Men movie, when he was cage fighting and some dude hit his head and you heard the tink, and then tried to punch his knuckles. And see, I never got that because every other time Wolverine throws a fist, you would think the full weight of metal behind that would hurt the bad guy or whoever he was punching.
Yeah, I mean, some of that stuff don't make any sense. The only thing I could say is, and this is where I'm theorizing that he would have been 195 pounds. I mean, why it could make sense is because you got to remember, instead of like a humongously thick layer of adamantium, it only had to been a thin layer that was around his bones.
Well, yeah, and even if you know anything about anatomy and physiology, like the bones are actually porous because they need to be fed, number one, but then certain bones create red blood cells, and the marrow needs nutrition and all that kind of stuff. So in whatever fictitious program, the doctors in Department H figured out how to bond metal to bone, there would be lattices almost instead of just like a full-on coating of bone. It's interesting to think about. I've really twisted my head around about that kind of stuff to the point where I'm examining molecular structure to try to make it real in my own head. And this is great. That's what the Phantom Menace is about. You can exercise your inner dork. We're not going to judge you. We're all dorks about something, man. Even to the point where like, geez, when we were growing up, like being a nerd, you had to keep it secret. But now, like everybody's a fucking nerd.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when I was even when like, I don't know, I want to say like 25 years or so ago, even then, maybe, 25, even 30 years ago, if I talked to somebody and I talked to them about something like comic books and everything like that, and they looked at the way I looked, being a bigger guy, and then, like having like piercings and stuff like
Yeah.
that, and facial hair and whatnot, and they tattoos and what, and they're like, "Oh, you read comic books?" Like, yeah, I got a huge Transformers toy collection too. And so,
Oh yeah.
yeah, and it's just something that they don't expect 90% of the time. Like, oh, well, shit, that's cool, or that's weird. Either way, I mean,
Well, and what are they going to say? To a 6'1", 230-pound guy. you know.
oh,
All right.
when I used before my back got really messed up and I had to stop working completely. At one point I was up like 250, because I used to spend. I worked, the last job I worked at was a place called OPEX, and basically what they built is automated mail sorting machines. The mail sorting machines where the letter comes in, it opens it up, it takes the check out, and it dumps the envelope and stuff like that.
Right.
We used to build them at this company. So the company was really good to the employees. They actually had like a full weight room. So if you paid like an extra like $5 or whatever it was out of your paycheck, or sent out of your paycheck, I should say, not paid extra, but just have it taken out of your paycheck, you can go use the gymnasium anytime you want, and you would get a little thing on your card that you get into the building with, so you could go into the weight room. And I used to go into the weight room all the damn time. So I was like 250 at the time. And yeah, I mean, even then, people would just they would just give you the strangest of looks, like they didn't know quite what to say. Like the first time I was talking to somebody, and they were just like, "Oh, I play this game. You've probably never heard of it." And I said, "Well, what's the name of the game?" And they was like, "Oh, Magic the Gathering." I said, "Oh yeah, I learned how to play that with the people at work." And they look at me like, "Oh, really?" Like like they didn't expect it. Okay, you look like a big biker or something. Yeah, you play Magic. Yeah.
Like, yeah, and I could whip your ass at it.
I better win too.
Right. Well, that's just the thing. Like, I think as time goes on, we're really redefining what it means to be a nerd or a geek or whatever you want to call it. It's more and more mainstream now because of the success of the Marvel movies, but it's not just going to be this asthmatic pocket protector calculus major, you know.
Yeah, back in the old days, that's what everybody thought a nerd was.
Pretty much, Bill Gates.
I mean,
that's
well, it's so funny. Like when movies like Revenge of the Nerds came out, I mean that really was what everybody thought a nerd was at the time, and that's all that they had ever be. But even back then, they hinted that, hey, anybody could wind up being a nerd if you just see that person that's inside of them, and that's why they turned Ogre into a nerd. Because who was less nerdy than Ogre in the first movie?
Truth. And again, that's also the point of the Breakfast Club, is like, if you get past what people look like and just talk to them for an hour, you never know who you're going to meet.
And I mean, it's just a shame that there's these idiots out here that want to erase stuff like that. They want to get rid of it. They want to reboot it. They want to just destroy it, so they could tell a whole new modern version where everybody's inclusive and give me a break.
They want to farm your mind about it, and redefine what happened 50 years ago as if those struggles never took place.
And what they're really doing is just, they're doing a disservice to everybody who has struggled for any kind of rights, or, to be heard or to be themselves. They're doing them a disservice by saying we need to erase all this stuff.
Well, yeah. And again, as you destroy history and tear down statues and burn books, who's going to fill the void except for the people trying to tell you how it went? That's one of the really powerful images from Indiana Jones, The Last Crusade. I'll never forget seeing that as a kid.
Yeah, I seen that one. Geez, that was just like I rewatched it again, maybe a month or two ago at the most. Yeah, it was just like perusing through the old Netflix, and I happened to find that it was on there still, and I was like, yeah, I'll watch that again. I hadn't seen that in a while.
Yeah, and those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, what the fuck was Stonehenge all about anyway? All right, Tommy. Well, I want to thank you again for coming out and joining us on the Savage Perspective. We do this show on Wednesdays, and then on Sundays I try to stretch out and do stuff that's more paranormal, like X-Files and unsolved mysteries type stuff. So go ahead and check that out. I'll be posting to my Twitter channel, and all of you subs on my wonderful YouTube feed, you'll get information on that. And don't forget to check out Tommy and the links he's left us for what do we got here? We got Culture Casino. He's rolling the dice on topics. We got
and you know what? I would probably be remiss if I don't do this for
Go ahead and throw one in. Yes.
For Mr. Walton. Because if I don't do that, I feel like I'm being remiss.
We got Thomas Gilkman, and then I'm waiting for this thing to drop. I'm afraid to say so, but I'm pretty sure I know what's coming down the pike. Yes, an enema betrayed. Author Stephen Walton's limited time bathroom guide to enemas.
Yes, I tell you, I have had the most fun messing with Stephen over all this. I mean, he knows it's actually coming from a good place, but I am having so much fun with it. As a matter of fact, I just did another video yesterday on it.
Anybody who talks to Stephen for longer than 15 minutes knows that he is a notorious shit talker, and he gives as good as he gets. So, Uncle Ethan has pie. Stephen has coffee enemas. That's about how it goes, man.
I really need everybody in the community to keep this going, because Stephen had actually said on the one stream, if I see hashtags for this in 6 months, so help me. Got to keep this alive for 6 months somehow. Got to inject new humor into it as often as we can.
Inject it right up the rectum. And we're gonna wreck them. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, right on, folks. I want to wish you all a wonderful evening. Take it easy, and we will